So what we're going to be doing here is a lesson on polynomials, linear factors, and zeros. The idea behind this is that when we find the zeros of a polynomial function, it's going to help us factor the polynomial. We'll be able to graph it, and we'll be able to solve the different equations related to this, okay? So I'm going to give us a problem, and we're going to work through this. Okay, so we have x to the third power minus 2x squared minus 15x. So first thing we want to do is we want to factor this, right? We want to write it as a product of factors. So we want to make sure we factor everything out as far as we can. So the first thing we have here is our x value. So we're going to factor that out. So you see now we have our x pulled out, and we have an x squared minus 2x minus 15. Now, using what we know from last chapter, we can factor our squared equation. So what are multiples of negative 15 whose sum is negative 2? Right? So we have negative 5 and 3. So we now have x times x minus 5 times x plus 3. So it's factored out. Okay? And that's how the factoring works. Okay? So, before we move on, let's try one more like this just to make sure we understand this basic way of factoring. So this time, let's go x to the third minus 2x squared. Oops, this makes x to the third minus x squared minus 12x. All right, so we're going to factor this out. So first thing we do is we factor out our x, right? So we have our x, and we have an x squared minus x minus 12. So what I have now is I need factors of 12, multiples of 12, whose sum is a negative 1. Well, we know that 4 times 3 is 12, so we need a negative 1, so that would be negative 4 and 3. So we have x times x minus 4 times x plus 3. It's factored. All right, so that's our first step. So now that we have it factored, what we're going to do is we're going to work on finding the zeros. All right, so if I give you this example here. So we have x plus 2 times x minus 1 times x minus 3. Okay, we want to find the zeros and graph that function. All right, so like you know, so what we do is we take each part, set equal to 0. So x plus 2 equals 0, x minus 1 equals 0, x minus 3 equals 0, right? So if I have my x plus 2 equals 0, then my x is negative 2. And then if I have my x minus 1 equals 0, x is 1, x minus 3 equals 0, x is 3. So my zeros are negative 2, 1, and 3. All right. Now, just having these zeros is not going to give us enough information to graph this, okay? So that's our first step. We'll say that's kind of step 1. Now, step 2 is we are going to find and use some additional points. I want 3 additional points. So I'm just going to pick 3 numbers. Let's say negative, 1, 0, and 2. Okay? We're going to plug those numbers into our equation to get 3 additional points. So as of now, we have our zeros. So negative 2, 0, 1, 0, and 3, 0. But I want more. So I'm going to plug this in. So I'm going to say negative 1 plus 2 times negative 1 minus 1 times negative 1 minus 3. All right. I'm going to plug those in. So I'd solve that, and I get that being 8. So now I have a point of negative 1, 8. I'm going to do the same thing with my 0. I'm going to say 0 plus 2 times 0 minus 1 times 0 minus 3, and I have 3, 4, 6 for that one. So I have a point of 0, 6. Then I do it for the 2's. 2 plus 2 times 2 minus 1 times 2 minus 3. So 4, 1, and negative 1. So I have negative 4 for that one. So I have another point of 2, negative 4. Okay, so now I have 6 different points. I have these 3 here, and I have these 3 here. Now my step 3 here is to determine my ends, my endpoints, that we did. Okay, so so far we have found our 0, right? The negative 2, 0, 1, 0, 3, 0. We have found our 3 other random numbers that we plugged in. So negative 1, 8, 0, 6, and 2 for negative 4 is what we used. And now what we need to look at is our ends of this. So look, I have x and x and x, right? So my step 3 is going to be finding my direction. So I have, that's an x cube. There's no numbers there, so it's just x cubed. And we look, there's no numbers, so that means that's a 1, right? So that means I have a positive number, right? So the positive number, and this is an odd number. So we look at our chart we had from earlier, and that shows us then that this would be a down and up graph. All right, so now we're going to graph all 6 points and know that goes down and up. All right, so I'm going to do this part in yellow. So I have my negative 2, 0, put that point, my 1, 0, put a point, and my 3, 0, put a point. Okay, so now we have our zeros. Now we're going to move on to our step 2 and do those 3 other points. Let's use green for that. So I have my negative 1, 8, 0, 6, and 2, negative 4. So now I have those all graphed. Now finally, we're going to look, and we know that it is down and up. So now I'm just going to draw this graph, connecting these points in the order that they show, right? So I know we're going to go from somewhere from up here, 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 and here. There's our graph. All right. So we're going to try doing this. Let's try one more here, and then we'll try a couple for practice for homework, and then that'll be it. So let's try this example here. So first thing we want to do, right, we have 3 steps we want, right? 1, 2, 3. So my first step is to find the zeros, right? So I set each part of this equal to 0. So I have x equals 0, x minus 3 equals 0, and x plus 5 equals 0, and solve for x. All right, so that gives me x equals 0, x equals 3, and x equals negative 5. Okay, we've done lots of these already. Now we just pick 3 other points. We usually want to try to pick points in between our variables here. So I'm going to say 1. So I'm going to plug in, let's say 1, negative 2, and let's go, let's do one more just to say regular 2. Okay, now we'll go from there. So we're going to plug that in to our equation. So I have 1 times 1 minus 3 times 1 plus 5, right? So that gives me 1, negative 2 times 6, right? And then I'm going to do the same thing as we continue then. So that gives me a total of negative 12. So I have 1, negative 12. Now let's go my negative 2. Negative 2 times negative 2 minus 3 times negative 2 plus 5. So we have our negative 2, negative 5, and positive 3. All right, so 5 times negative 5 times 3, negative 15 times negative 2, is positive 30. So I have negative 2, 30. And then I plug in my last one, 2 times 2 minus 3 times 2 plus 5. So we have, I'm going to just write this one next to it, 2 times negative 1 times 7. So we have positive 14. So I have positive 2, positive 14. That's my points. Now I have to, if I expand this, right, I have x, and x. There's no number with it, so it's x cubed again. So what that means is that we have a 1 and a third power, so our graph goes. So now we just have to graph this. So I have my 3 points from my zeros. I have my 3 other points I plugged in. I know from expanding it that it is a down up because it's 1x to the third. And if we know number of turns, remember, n minus 1 is the number of turns. Here is our n. So we have 2 turns in our graph as well. All right, so now I'm going to graph the points. So I'll do this one in red. I'll do this one in blue, and I'll finish it up in the green. So let's put those points in and see what we have. All right, now because of space, I made my y-axis here. I made that by 5s, and I did my x-axis with 1s, just to make it fit space-wise. So there, I know it's down and up. All right, so we're going to go from negative 4 up and around. So we go, oops, let's try that again. Okay, oops, that was a little rough. But we have our 1 turn here at the top, and our 2nd turn there at the bottom. Forget that little squiggle there, and that's how that works. Okay, so I want you to try just a couple of these to see if you can do it. So I want you to do page 293, and we're just going to do number 8 and number 12. Okay, so that's just 2 of those. I want you to factor them out, and then solve that. And then I want you to also do numbers, let's do number 16 as well, which is the graphing. All right, so watch the videos and do these 3 problems, and you'll be set.